Welcome back. As you may or may not know, I am known as Eli the Computer Guy, and I am known as Eli the Computer Guy, and my current project is something called SiliconDojo.com, authorityless, gatekeeperless, free to the end user, hands-on technology education that empowers you to do whatever the hell it is that you want to do. So we go to SiliconDojo.com. We have self-study classes, so we have Python, Bottle, Web App Framework, and SQL with SQLite. Currently working on a Moondream AI self-study program, so you can just go and you can just take those, become a member. There is no cost, any of that type of thing. We do Zoom classes. Tomorrow I'm going to do a Zoom class on Comfy UI for stable diffusion, creating images and videos, doing that. And I also do a one-on-one coaching sessions every Monday from 1 to 5. Basically, they're 30-minute sessions. And I get on and I talk with you folks about your careers and your businesses and jobs and all of that kind of stuff. Right. So, anyways, when I do those one-on-one coaching sessions, I get questions. Some of the questions I think are relevant to the viewers, to other students out there, and so that's why I do these particular videos. So the question that came up on Monday, which was a bit concerning in the context. A bit concerning in the context, just gonna put it out there, was should you take a job you are overqualified for, or more appropriately with this particular person, a job that's not quite in the niche that you want to be in? Well, not really in the niche you want to be on. It's computers, but there's more to computers than computers. So, anyways, I was talking to this student, and they're trying to figure out what's going on because they just finished their master's degree. In like hard computer stuff. So there's information technology, which is basically like MCSE systems, that type of stuff. There's computer science, coding, programming, building operating systems, that type of thing. And then there's computer engineering, and computer engineering is actually dealing with the hardware, actually designing processors, actually designing GPUs, actually designing the hardware that does all the cool stuff, right? Anybody can build their own web browser. Can you build a processor? All right. So, anyways, this student is coming out of a pretty good program here, actually in North Carolina, and they're graduating with their master's degree, and they haven't been able to get a job designing hardware, and they did get an option to go with a major tech company, but like as a solutions architect or something. So they deal with hardware again. So designing hardware, and that's something in computers, right? That's over there. And then like solutions is basically when you go to companies, when you're sent to companies by the by your company, right? And basically, you design their overall systems. Like, okay, you're going to have 10,000 Active Directory users. Ergo, that means you should have one server, one use server per 1,000 Active Directory users, so that you create a cluster of 10 servers to deal with the 10,000 Active Directory servers, or 10,000 Active Directory users. Once you have 10 servers, then those things need to get backed up. And so the solution that we would provide is this SAN, Storage Area Network solution, and that would be where your backups and all that kind of stuff go. Blase, 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 blase. So it's computers and it's technical, but it sure as hell isn't designing CPUs and processors and all that kind of stuff, right? So, anyways, the interesting thing, I was sitting there, I was talking with him, and it was like, okay, well, here, I'm just gonna go down the standard set of questions. Standard set of questions, because I know, like every time you go through something, it seems unique and new. But here's the reality. The world has done it 1,000 times before, right? So anyway, so I'm sitting there, I'm talking to this person. They seem nice. They seem good. Doesn't seem to have any issues, again, with being able to talk or whatever else, so they're not screwing up the interviews that way. So we go through, and it's like, okay, well, the first question is, does anybody else in your cohort, were they able to get jobs? Right? Because that's the big thing, right? Because there's a lot of garbage. There's a lot of garbage computer science or computer programs out there, computer degrees out there. So sometimes, right, you get a whole bunch of people to spend $100,000 on a degree, and you're all screwed. You're all screwed. Anyway, so it's like so yeah. Did any of the other peers get a job? It's like, yes, all my other friends got jobs. Like, oh. Oh, well, that sucks. And I was like, okay, well, how did they get their jobs? So most of them got jobs through internships. So they did their internships, and then they were able to get picked up for jobs that way. So I was like, okay, so why? And again, me being me, why didn't you do an internship? So I did internships, did two internships. One of them didn't really do what he wanted to do. Again, it's kind of one of those things like he got trained in something, he was taking an internship or something, but that wasn't really it. And then the other one is downsizing. Is downsizing. So they're not hiring anybody. So I was like, okay, well, okay, but you did the you got the degree and you got the internships and your buddies got jobs. So that doesn't sound too bad. I don't know. Like, did you party too much? Like, I don't know. What's your GPA? And it's like, well, my bachelor's GPA was 3.9 and my master's GPA is 4.0. Like, oh, okay. Well, that is getting more interesting, right? And so the issue is now he's coming to the end of his program. So May is the end of his program. And then the next question is how much money do you have? Again, it's all about the resources, and got enough resources to get him through something like August. So basically, doesn't have to get a job today, does need to get a job, within the next number of months. And one of the big issues being coming out of a real, technology science program, you don't expect, getting a job afterwards to be that big a deal. And so that is the big question. It's like, what happens when you put out, I think he said he put out 100 resumes, went to a number of interviews, and the only job offer he got was for this solutions architect type thing, which is in computers, but has absolutely nothing to do really with what he wants to do in computers. And so one of the things he was saying is like, well, I don't know, like maybe I take that position because again, it is with a big company and it does pay. And he's like, and I'll do it for a year. And then I'll hop off to the next thing. And that's when I realized I was talking to a 20-some-odd-year-old. We're like, oh, you're going to work at 1 year. Oh, yeah, I'm just going to work at this 1 year. And then I'm going to do what I really want to do. Yeah, we've all been there. We've all been there. That's not really how the world works. And I think this is an interesting thing to be thinking about. Again, this whole idea of do you take a job you're either overqualified for or isn't really in what you want to do, or do you wait for a better opportunity? And the first thing that I have to tell you, point blank, is all of this crap is a risk. All of this crap is a gamble. I don't care what your mommy and your daddy and your career counselors told you. Just because you paint by numbers does not mean this world gives a damn whether or not you starve to death. I think this is one of the big problems I see with young people nowadays. And again, one of the big frustrations, right? I did everything I was told to. I did everything I was supposed to. Why are things not working out? It's like, because it's life. Because it's life. That's how life works. You can do everything you're told to do and still die a god awful horrible death. Have I told you about my wife with 3 cancers? Yeah. It's amazing how life is just like, oh, you have a plan? Whap! A little 9-year-old girl comes out of nowhere and just punches you in the ball sack. Again, what's the difference between boys and men? When a 9-year-old comes out of nowhere and punches a boy in the ball sack, they go over and they start crying and gagging and coughing. Little 9-year-old girl comes out of nowhere and punches a man in the ball sack. They go, I guess I would like a cup of coffee now. Like, what? Once you've had a random 9-year-old girl just come out of nowhere and just fucking punch you in the ball set. Once that's happened enough times, you're just like, yeah, whatever. Oh my God, what happened? I don't know. Something. I always think about that. It wasn't a 9-year-old girl, it was a 17-year-old girl. I was in the Army. I was at AIT. Anyways, I was at the horse farm. I was volunteering at the horse barn, something to do. And you had all the high school girls at the horse farm. Anyway, I was saying something. I was being a jackass. Anyway, she just punched. Oh my God, she must have been 110 pounds wet. For some reason, because again, you're all young, Anyways, girl hitting the shit out of an army guy is funny for some reason. She just fall. I went down to my knees. I was gasping for air. I was gasping for air. Anyways, that's the real world. That's the real world. You have plans. And then reality does whatever reality has got to do. Again, I will warn you folks out there, 9/11, none of us realized 9/11 was going to happen. There was a day before 9/11, and then there was a day after 9/11. The Great Recession, we knew something was wrong with the economy. We didn't think it was quite that bad, though. And then that all went to hell. COVID. Hey, remember COVID? Remember in November of whatever it was, 2019? It's like, hey, did you hear about that Chinaman who coughed over in Hunan province? And you're like, why the hell do I care about a Chinaman coughing in Hunan province? Well, there's a reason for it, right? And that's the thing, is the world... You go into the world. You prepare yourself the best based off of what you understand to deal with the world. And then the world is going to do something else. The world is going to do something else. And that's just the reality. And the sad thing is, like I say, I see a lot of the young folks out there, they're frustrated, they're angry, and society has done them wrong and everything else. And the big thing to understand is this is just how it is. Again, I think we should have socialized medicine. To be clear, I think we should have a single-payer health care plan. Think we should have better health care policy. I think we should have better education policy. I believe in a lot of those socialistic concepts. That doesn't mean a 9-year-old girl ain't gonna come around the corner and just crack you in the ball sack just because it's Tuesday. But anyways, I think this is a big thing to be thinking about. Because, again, like with right now, with the economy, it's weird. Like, it's weird when we talk about the economy. Because people can't make up their mind. People cannot make up their mind, especially in the technology profession, about the economy, right? Like, I look around and I think the economy is a disaster. I talk with so many people that are losing jobs, that are not being able to find jobs. I'm just getting so much anecdotal stories from people. And it seems like a disaster to me. It seems like we're running into some really big issues. But then when I say that publicly, then I get browbeat to hell and back. And don't you understand that? Technology is the world. We need more technology professionals. Cybersecurity is the future. Whatever. Right? Again, I say there's a problem with the job market, and everybody tells me I'm an idiot. And then we turn around and people talk about AI, and I'm like, I don't know, AI is fine. I mean, again, it's not AI, it's not artificial intelligence, it's LLM models and multimodal models and all that kind of stuff. It's not the same thing. Tensors are not intelligence. But anyways, I'm like, as far as AI is concerned. And then everybody says, well, don't you understand, Eli? All programming jobs are going to be gone in a year. Like, what do you people make up your damn minds? Either the technology industry is fine or the technology industry is dying. Like, could you just... I feel like people decide whatever their thought is about the technology industry based off of whether they can try to get a 9-year-old to punch me in the balls. It's like, oh, that's what Eli thinks? I'm going to say something different to prove Eli is dumb. So anyways, right. The one thing that I will say about our economy, though, is it is a cluster. It is a cluster F, and it has very little to do with AI. Very little to do with AI. It has a lot to do with 0% or 1% interest rates. So basically, after the Great Recession, after last economic disaster, they drove interest rates down to 1% in order to boost the economy, which was, I don't know if it was fine, but it was fine enough. The problem is... They did not raise those interest rates for a long time. And so essentially what you have people what are called chasing returns, high net worth individuals. So they could borrow money at 1% interest rates, basically throw that money somewhere else to try to get higher interest rates. And essentially they get money for almost nothing. I borrow money from these people, I loan it to these people, I get the difference in interest rates. right? And the idea is everybody's chasing, right, the next big Facebook or Google. So a lot of that 1% money gets essentially thrown into the tech market. The tech world has been a disaster for a long time. Again, I argue we plateaued back in 2016, 2017. I mean, legitimately, you want to sit down and have a cup of coffee and talk about it, I will explain to you why I think we plateaued in 2016, 2017. But anyways, I would argue we plateaued back then. The problem is revenues weren't good enough to bring in investment. Profit sure as hell wasn't good enough to bring in investment. Other metrics started to be a little bit squirrely. And so a lot of these tech companies realized, oh, you know how we can try to impress investors so they hand us money is by hiring employees. So basically, they started hiring employees not because they needed them, not because it added to anything, but basically to impress the investors. The issue is, right, interest rates go through the roof. We're now at like whatever interest rates are, 4 or 5% by the Fed, and whatever 6, 7% by the time it gets to you, at least. And the reality is the high net worth individuals, it's no longer worth it to them to take money out, borrow money and then try to give it to the tech companies. And a lot of that is literally just unraveling now. So we have a lot of people that have had tech jobs. They have had technology positions. They haven't necessarily been doing tech jobs for a long time. Again, it's one of those things like the day in the life of videos. Like, I just don't even understand the day in the life of videos, right? You see that day in the life of a technology professional. And I watch those. I'm like, what the fuck are you people talking about? Again, I started in the Army, went to the corporate world, had my own, was a consultant, had my own company, even doing YouTube. And I look at these day in the life videos, and I'm like, it's fine, but how the hell is that a tech job? I don't understand. Where's the screaming? Where's the yelling? Where's the complete fucking insanity and people melting down? Hey, you know what's missing in the day of the life video here is where somebody's having a fucking nervous breakdown in the middle of the break room. That's when you know you're dealing with a real technology company. When some employee did something absolutely perfect as far as everybody understood, and yet it still took everything down, and now they're fucking crying in the middle of the break room because they're like, "What the fuck is wrong with me?" That's is the reality of being a technology professional. Anyways, kombucha and quinoa and all that. I like my kombucha. I like my quinoa. It just has nothing to do with being a technology professional, right? So, anyways, we have these 1% interest rates. That's been a couple of, and now basically the investment from that is going away. The previous administration, the Biden administration, was really screwing the tech industry with these basically restrictions on sending hardware to China. So the Biden administration decided China should not progress in AI, which is its own racist as hell policy. But anyway, so they started trying to prevent American companies and anybody that deals with American companies from sending chips and processors and things to China. That does two things, especially for somebody like that's dealing with hardware. One, that just restricts the sales. If you tell NVIDIA they can't sell cards to China, ergo, they're not going to sell those cards. Right, and then on top of that, right, that understandably pushes the Chinese to start improving their infrastructure, start improving their manufacturing capacity, so that they start producing more stuff. And as we all know, once China starts producing stuff, oh, it's gonna be a bad day for the competition, right? And again, China's full of 1.2, 1.3 billion people. And again, they're not all, but they've got smart and disciplined and qualified and motivated folks. I'm pretty damn sure they can be successful creating hardware. And, it's again, if you have an American company, you're more likely to hire American employees. And surprise, surprise, if you're a Chinese company, you're most likely going to be hiring Chinese employees, even before we get through foreign relations and security and all that kind of stuff. You're just going to hire the people that are around you, right? So if NVIDIA can't sell as much hardware, that hardware isn't going to be sold. If China starts producing hardware, they're not going to be hiring American people to produce it. And we get that whole economic kerfuffle going on. And now, right now, again, I'm filming this on April 3rd, the day after our Independence Day. April 2nd, 2025 will go down in history as our economic Independence Day. That is what I've been informed. That's what I've been informed. Anyways, we have all kinds of stupidity. So 10% tariffs, as far as I understand, across the board. 35% tariffs going against China. 25% tariffs going against the EU. And one of the things to be thinking about, again, as a technology professional, is we need hardware. Right? If I'm going to be building IoT systems, I need to buy the IoT hardware. Now, this is a bad example because this actually gets produced in Italy. But most of this crap doesn't get produced in Italy. Most of this crap gets produced in, wait for it, China. And so the issue for companies is, if they're bringing in this hardware, depending on what those tariffs end up looking like for them, basically that's taxes that they have to pay. And if they're paying those taxes, that's money they can't pay employees. Again, one of the weird things we have in our capitalistic system is that we don't train our young people on how our system works. But here's the thing, the company only has so much money, right? The company has money to buy server racks. And the company has money to buy toilet paper. And the company has money to give bonuses to the CEO so they can buy a yacht. Right? The company only has so much money. Like if they buy more toilet paper, that means you get fewer server racks. Right? And that's just how it is, right? So when the government starts, increasing your taxes, again, especially for stuff coming in from China by 35%. And again, it is important to understand that 35% rate may be higher or lower than you may realize, because that 35% rate is the value basically when it comes in. So if I buy a product for $10 and then I resell it for $100, if there's a 35% tariff, that means I should pay $3.50. So I was making $90 profit before, now I make $86.50 profit. What's the translation there? Who knows? Again, it's still $3.50 per item coming out of your pocket, but it is what it is. On the other hand, if you're selling a $100 item and you were buying it for $90, now you're increasing the cost of that thing by like $30 a pop, and that's going to get translated, right? That's going to be huge. Again, $3.50 per unit coming in is an expense, but it's probably tolerable. $35 per unit coming in, again, at the same sale of a price point, is going to be brutal for everybody. And that's just simply money that companies are not going to functionally have to pay people, and they got to figure it out. Again, that's the whole thing. Like, do you buy the fancy coffee? Do you get the intern? Do you have 5 people on a team or 4 people on a team? Gets into all of this messiness, and it's something that you folks really need to think about. Again, like, you have to understand, like, for me, again, it's interesting, right? So when the Great Recession happened, so it was like 2008, I was like 32 years old. I'd already dealt with 3 recessions. By the time I was 32 years old, that was my 3rd recession, right? I graduated high school into a major recession. I had the dot-com bust, and then I had the Great Recession. And one of the big things to understand is, like, you don't really understand how that crap's going to play out, right? So in 2000, right, I was like a 24-year-old flying all over the country, a direct line to the travel department, just winging it. Winging it, right? Showing up at a site, $500,000 build out, calling up the boss, going, "Where's the plans?" Boss being like, "We don't got none." Get it done. Like, what? Anyways, right? That probably wasn't a good idea. Let me tell you, it probably wasn't a good idea for that company. But that was the time period. They needed technology professionals. They paid people. They gave people like me way too much responsibility. And anyway, so right, I worked in the one corporation. I'm getting for another corporation, and I thought I was on the fast track. I thought, like, everybody who knew me was like, "You're on the 5-year retirement plan, Eli. You're smart. You understand this stuff. You're good. You're gonna be retired in 5 years." So, anyways, right. I decided to leave the company that I was at, and I was going to go backpack through Europe for 3 months, because that's what I was told. I was told young people should backpack through Europe. It's part of your life experience. And so I was like, well, you know what? My next job, I'm going to be serious. I'm going to be serious. I'm going to be on the CIO truck. I'm going to go to the top. Right? Everybody here knows how smart I am. That's what I'm going to do. And so I'm going to backpack through Europe for 3 months, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to be serious. Well, basically, as my plane was taking off, the technology economy was exploding behind me. think about it like the metaphor. You see like these disaster movies where the plane is taking off and the entire world is exploding behind them. Yeah, imagine that scenario if you couldn't see the explosions that were in fact occurring. Anyways, so yeah, the entire tech ended. Oh, it was just brutal. It just, whoa, that was just fucking horrible. Anyways, and yeah, that's why I wound up being a consultant. I didn't become a consultant. I put up pull tab signs so I could afford some damn beer. Enough people actually need computer repair, became a consultant. Right? Anyways, again, that's right. Like, we don't know what's happening. Again, when the Great Recession happened, right? I remember the Great Recession, summer, Bear Stearns fell. And I was like, oh, poor Bear Stearns people. They should be like me. They should be a technology professional. We're fine. And the next people fell, and the next people fell. And it was like April of the next year till the dominoes fucking squashed us. Oh, that was just brutal. Right, and that's the thing. That's the thing. When the economy goes sideways, the economy just goes sideways. There's no rhyme. There's no reason. There's no story. Things just go boom. Things just go boom. And you got to figure out what you're going to do. Will things get better? One of the important things, because I know people think I'm negative. I'm not negative. I'm just realistic. Again, realistic in the modern world means you're negative, which, well, yeah, climate change. Anyways, I'm not negative. I'm just realistic. Here's the thing. Things will get better. Things will get better. I guarantee you. Again, I read history. It's just one of the things that I do. I read lots of history books. One of the things you'll find with recessions and depressions and all that, it's somewhere between an 8 to 15 year cycle. It just, if you go back, right? You don't think about it. Do you ever think about the canal bust of the 1800s? Do you remember when canals were overinvested in and then there was a canal bust? No, because you're like, what? Why is he talking about canals? Railroads got overinvested in. Telegraph lines got overinvested in. Everything gets overinvested, right? You get a new technology, people start making money, people invest, they make a lot of money, everybody invests, you build way too much of the crap, nobody needs all that, and everything explodes. And then you go through these cycles, right? So the recession happens, and again, I don't know, it takes a little while to get through. I remember the Great Recession. I was dealing with old white people. Oh, old white people are brutal. Old white people are brutal. I remember saying, I was in this meeting. I was like, Jesus Christ, are we all assholes? We might all be assholes. Anyway, so we're talking about the when the recession will end. So talking with, people that get paid a lot of money for figuring out when recessions end. And basically, I remember this one guy's like, well, here's the thing. Basically, the poor and middle class people have to be hungry enough that they go out and get whatever job they can. Once we hit that point, the recession will be over. It's like, Jesus. Fuck. Again, I'm not pessimistic. I've just been in way too many rooms. Just been in way too many rooms, and that was the thing, right? Because that was when the Great Recession was all that was going on, right? So the carpet got pulled out from a lot of people. A lot of people felt that they are valued. Do you know who I am? Do you know how valuable I am? And the answer is they're not. The answer is they're not, right? They were. Right, in 2007, they had been worth $200,000 a year. In 2009, they were worth flipping burgers. Right, and anyways. And so one of these money people, they were just talking about it. And they were like, that's the thing. Is like basically how it has to work through the system is when people get hungry enough to go back and take whatever damn job they can get, that is what's going to rebuild the economy. Which is brutal, but it's also true. So when looking at all this kerfuffleness going on right now, whether it's the interest rates, whether it's Biden's horrible policies, whether it's Trump's horrible policy, I'm just tired of horrible policies. Hey, inflation. Could we have a president that deals with inflation? That's all I want. Anyways, you ever notice? I'm not going to go too much on a tangent, but people were complaining about inflation, and then we get the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was the largest climate change policy in our nation's history, from Biden. And then we get to Trump, and everybody's complaining about inflation, so they elect him because of inflation, and then he puts on the biggest tariffs in our nation's history. And you're like, how much clearer do the American people have to be? Can we deal with inflation? Can we just deal with inflation? But anyways, important thing to understand is a kerfuffle that we're going through that might be getting a lot worse pretty damn soon. We'll pass. It will pass in a year or two. And so one of the questions you need to be asking yourself, again, especially as you're a new person and you're going out into the economic kerfuffle. It's not a recession, apparently, so I'll call it a kerfuffle. We have the economic kerfuffle going on. You're going out into this economic kerfuffle, and basically you've been trained to a certain level. And so the question then becomes, do you take a job that is below you? That's a hell of a thing. That's a hell of a thing to ask, and it's a hell of a thing to think about. One of the things that I would have you consider when you're thinking about taking a job that's below you is one, is it actually below you? Right? There's a lot of times, especially as technology professionals, there's jobs we don't necessarily want to do, but they are at our skill level. Just because they're lame doesn't mean they're below you, right? Like, whatever, right? You go out there, you want to be some type of like cloud engineer. They don't have any cloud engineer openings right now, but they do need an administrator for local infrastructure at a local factory, right? You have a local factory, they've got a server room, they've got industrial computers, industrial stuff going on, and so they need somebody. Like, you may be looking at that and be like, oh, well, that's local, that's old school. But really, at the end of the day, is it really below you, or you just being a snooty little snooter, right? That's one of the first things to think about. The next thing to think about is, if you can get into a company, is there the possibility that you could rapidly get the hell out of wherever you're at, right? So first step into a company, you take the first job. Can you lateral, or can you move up? Not even move up, just can you lateral into a different position, right? I come in as a solutions position, and then I can lateral over to the hardware department, right? As soon as you're in the company. You'll see this like with the government. How the government was. I have no idea how the government is now. How the government was apparently 8 weeks ago. All right, the federal government at least. Lateral was a big thing. Like, getting into the government can be an utter pain in the ass. But once you're in the government, you can get jobs. You can get a job somewhere else. Like, once you've been vetted. Again, I had buddies of mine in federal law enforcement, and I talked about that. There's a place called FLETC, or there was. I don't know if it still exists. Federal Law Enforcement Training Campus or whatever. Anyways, they were talking about it, where you get hired for Border Patrol, or you get hired for any of these federal law enforcement things. You go down to FLETC, and then you get to FLETC, and apparently you have recruiters at FLETC trying to poach people from the people that had just gotten hired. It's like, oh, you're coming in with Border Patrol. Hey, we offer more money over here if you want to come over here, right? So that's one of the things that you can think about. Like, so if you can get in, like, with a major corporation, right? They deal with the stuff that you want to deal with. Maybe you get in the door, maybe you deal with things for a little while, and then you're able to lateral into something else. That's something that you need to think about. One of the things with this, though, that you do need to consider is that the kerfuffle that we're going to be going through, and life in general, doesn't work out how the storybook in your mind thinks it's going to work out. Right? Again, it was interesting talking to this person, and they were like, well, I'll do 1 year, right, as a solutions person, and then it's like, oh, you're so 20 something. Because here's the thing, like, we all say that. We all say, I'll do a year. But again, this economic kerfuffle. Again, if you look at when the Great Recession happened basically through 2008, 2012. Again, there's a specific time period for when the recession actually did happen, but then there's how it actually affected human beings. And that was for 4 years. So we're going into this particular kerfuffle. So again, depending on when it starts, I'd say it's starting about now. Let's say it starts in 2025. This kerfuffle could be going on till 2029, very realistically. And depending on just how badly they've A, screwed up the global economy, and B, are going to continue screwing up the global economy, it could be longer than 4 years. And so that's one of the things you also have to be considering too, is like, are you being realistic with the time frames that you're thinking about for taking that lesser job or whatever else? Are you realistically only going to be at that job for quote unquote as long as you think it is? The reason that this becomes important is because when you go to get hired, right? The big thing that the hiring manager, the HR person, whoever is going to be dealing with you is going to be dealing with is the story of you, right? The world is but a server room, and we are but all drama geeks at the end of the day. Right? That's the truth, right? When I'm looking at hiring you, and when a hiring manager is looking at hiring you, they want to understand their story. They have the story of their institution. They have the story of themselves and other people in the institution, and they're trying to figure out how your story is synergistic with what they're doing. And that's one of the big problems, especially with, let's say, stay at home moms, right? You know, you have a woman, she gets pregnant, she has a kid, she's out of the job market for 2 or 3 years, and frankly, it shouldn't matter. Again, if we lived in a sane world, that should not matter that much. But we do not live in a sane world, so that woman goes back into the workforce and they're like, oh, why were you out of a job for 3 years? And it's like, well, to raise a kid so our society has a future. Oh, so you prioritize the future of our society? I don't know if we want somebody like that in our company. Right? Again, it's one of the big things with people with long-term unemployment. Again, when the Great Recession happened. So people, it's like a screwed up thing where if you're out of work for like less than 3 months, it's relatively quote unquote easy to get a job. But the screwed up thing is the longer you're out of work, the harder it is to get a job. Because if you have a 3 month gap in your resume, most people are going to shrug their shoulders. You get a 6 month gap in your resume, people are like, You get a year gap in your resume, people are like, You get a 2 year gap in your resume, it's like, right? But you're like, the global economy crap. So can you explain to me this 2 year gap in your resume? It's like the global economy collapsed. I put out 100 resumes a week. I did every fucking interview I could get my hands on. I did self-study programs at home. Nobody was goddamn hiring. What do I need to explain? Oh, I don't know if we need somebody like you at our company, right? That's a big thing. Why? Why? Like, if nobody else hired you, I'm not sure I want to take the risk on hiring you. And so, one of the things you need to be thinking about again with this lower level job, this job that's below you, or to the left or the right of you, or whatever else, is in that 2 years, is your story still going to match the job you want? So you get this person, right? Got their master's degree, dealing with hardware, right? That should be fine. That should be solid for a little while at least, a couple years at least. Goes into a job, solutions, right? Selling server racks or whatever else. Does that for a year. Probably not too horrible. Probably not too horrible. Again, the high technical skills might languish a little bit, but you go to a year and a half, you go to 2 years. Okay, so I see this computer engineering degree on your resume, but your experience is shilling hardware. Basically, your degree is in designing hardware, but what you've actually been doing is selling hardware for the past couple of years. Hmm. How does that story fit synergistically into what they're thinking about? Again, if they're a hardware company and they want to start designing things, because the issue that you're going to be dealing with is it's not just you, right? Again, you, right? You are the center of your universe. Problem is, there's 8 billion other people on the planet that all also believe that they are the center of the universe, right? And so that's the thing. Is like if you put out 100 resumes, again, as I've said many times, if you put out 100 resumes, if you put out 1,000 resumes, that means some poor bastard on the other side is getting that many resumes. So if somebody gets 100 resumes in, again, for designing hardware and all that kind of stuff, and you get these people that are straight out of college, you get people that got the internships, and people that and you have been doing solutions for 2 years. Where do you go in that resume pile? You probably don't go in the trash can. right? You probably don't have too many consonants in your name. You probably have a couple of vowels in your name, so you don't go straight in the trash can. But you probably go into this pile, right? That's right. You got this pile. I got a couple of piles. This pile, the left pile, that's the gold star pile. That's a pile like, bam! I want one of these. But against reality, you're probably not going to get one of those because everybody wants one of those. So then you have this pile over here. Well, this pile over here is probably qualified. Probably can do the job. And then you have this file over here where everybody who has too many consonants in their name goes in. That's a horrible joke, Eli. It's not a joke. It's not a joke. You all know it's not a joke. Anyways, the problem is you get put in this pile. And that pile, again, still has 50 resumes. And so the issue that you're going to be dealing with is your story going to be better than the competition that you're dealing with to get the job? Again, as more and more people come into the market. And that is a curious question. And that is the bet. That is the gamble. What do you decide? My recommendation for this particular person was probably to seek their PhD. They were worried about getting pigeonholed, so they could go for their PhD, but they're worried that they would get pigeonholed with their PhD. One of the things I would say, again, I think I forgot to tell this person, is you don't actually have to put your PhD on your resume. Have you ever seen this crap in the real? Again, we want to talk about how idiotic the real world is. I literally have known PhDs that don't put PhD on their resume. You don't have to. It sounds fucked up, but you don't have to. Because here's the thing. And when somebody sees a PhD on your resume, apparently, because I'm not one, you really get tracked into kind of that research academic thing. Like it's considered that you're too smart to do any practical work. But there's a lot of PhDs out there that actually like to do practical work. And so there are a lot of PhDs out there that literally do not put the PhD on their resume. So one thing is, you don't have to put it technically on your resume, but that kind of defeats the purpose of what I'm talking about here. One of my arguments for going for the PhD is you're going in this world, you need money, whatever. Again, PhD programs generally can try to find some money by hook or by crook, and that will take you out of the job market for anywhere between 2 to 4 years, and it will give you something that looks good on your resume. What is the story? What is the narrative? I went for my bachelor's degree, from my master's degree, into my PhD. Now I'm coming out of my PhD. So you're coming out of your PhD in 2027, 2029, depending on how long the program takes. Hopefully this particular economic kerfuffle should be over and you walk out pretty squeaky clean. Right, so this person's like 23, I think they were. So 25, somewhere between 25 to 27. You come out with your PhD into an environment. You can say, I have been working on this for this many years. Hire me. Hopefully the economy is doing better. Again, I would actually argue, again, from a realistic standpoint, I think hardware is going to be very valuable going into the future. We have been in this Wintel world, this x86 Wintel world, for 30 odd years, 30, 40 years at this point, right? Where basically everything is built on the same types of systems. Again, we had something called convergence back in 2005. Everything from access control to telephone systems to surveillance systems to computers, they all converged onto using TCP/IP4, Ethernet standard, the whole 9 yards. I would argue we are now in a world of deconvergence, whatever. Basically where everything is going their own ways now, right? If you see Meta is creating their own chips now. Amazon is creating their own chips. Google is creating their own chips. Microsoft is creating their own chips. All these major players are literally designing and building their own hardware that, again, I can't get my hands on it even if I wanted to. Right? It's literally their stuff. It's not that it's so expensive I can't get my hands on it. It's not like one of those NVIDIA GPUs. It's simply it's not sold to the public. They build it for their server rooms, and that's it. So I think in the hardware world, the opportunities are probably pretty bright. But the question is, again, if you can't get a job now, we're going into the economic kerfuffle. How do you keep your story going until the economic kerfuffle dies down a little bit? And that would be my thought for a lot of people, is actually staying in school. I mean, go to school, try to write out this crap show, and try to make it to the other side. Because I do get concerned. Like, again, if you're a programmer and you do solutions, fine, whatever, right? Again, if you're a network engineer, systems engineer, and you do solutions, fine, whatever. But man, if you're dealing with hardcore hardware design, processor design, and that kind of stuff, and you go off the solutions, I really genuinely wonder what the road back looks like. Because it's not so easy. It's not so easy, especially in this big old globalized world. So, anyways, some things to ponder. My other advice to this person was to do a road show. Again, with hardware, it's interesting. Everybody thinks Silicon Valley. There's a lot of places in this country, geographic places in this country, that deal with hardware. Again, one of my old sponsors that I still cannot remember their name. They're out of Lincoln, Nebraska. They're a multi-billion-dollar tech company out of Lincoln, Nebraska. Anyways, they deal with environmental sensors and hardware and all that kind of stuff. PDUs, those are big things. Power distribution units. Anyways, Lincoln, Nebraska. An interview with, dealing with LTE modems and things. I think they were out of Minneapolis. It's actually interesting, right? The heartland of America. Nobody thinks about it as like a technology center, because it's not a center. It's spread out. But there are a lot of technology companies that simply get overlooked. Again, I mean, you look at Columbus, Ohio. Columbus, Ohio just got Lucky Palmer's new, whatever the hell, Terminator factory. Oh god, that's gonna be scary. Anyways, they need hardware design and that kind of thing. And so that was one of the things I also advised, was to go around and try to do a bit of a roadshow, right? Go schmooze, see if you can get some informational interviews, get a cup of coffee, prove to people that you actually care, that you actually want to get a job. Again, you show up to Lincoln, Nebraska, and you ping the HR department and say, "Hey, I'd like to grab a cup of coffee with one of your people or whatever to understand better what you're looking for out of a hardware engineer or whatever." That looks a sight better than just some random jackasses, sitting in PDFs of their resume or whatnot. So that was some advice that I gave too. So, anyways, there you go. Some things to ponder. What's the answer? I don't know. I don't know. My wife and I are thinking about it. Again, we're supposed to be moving to Miami. And yeah, there's questions. There's questions, because the ramifications. Again, whatever you feel about the overall, whatever you feel about globalism, whatever you feel about America's place in the world, whatever you feel about NATO or any of that kind of stuff. Again, there's like that. there's that overview thought, but then there's just the brass tacks, and then there's like how you go about doing it. And this just seems to be an atrocious way to go about doing things. Again, what you have to understand is our world has been pushed, again, with globalization, to something called just-in-time inventory. So you go back to when I was a youngin', right? When I graduated high school, we did not generally have what was called just-in-time inventory. Computer systems aren't what they are today. Communication systems aren't what they are today. And so basically what companies would do is they would figure out how much how many components they needed to build products for like the next week or the next month or the next 6 months. And they would go out and they would contract with vendors to produce that number of parts. And then what happens is those parts get shipped to a warehouse somewhere, and they get put in the warehouse, right? So company needs 6 months worth of products, more or less. They have 6 months worth of products in a warehouse. The issue is that costs a lot of money. That means they literally have 6 months of inventory just sitting there gathering dust. Also, from a tax purpose, weirdly enough, our government taxes your inventory, which is its own crap show. And then you get weird issues like, what if the market changes? What if your factory burns down but your warehouse doesn't? That would suck. All right, so anyway, so with communications and technology and all that, free trade agreements, we have this stuff called just-in-time inventory. So the idea with just-in-time inventory is you're only ordering from your suppliers at the point that you need those parts, right? So if tomorrow Ford needs 100 odometers, they literally ordered 100 odometers last week, and they will get them in the morning. They put them in the cars. The next shipment comes in, the next shipment comes in, the next shipment comes in, the next shipment comes in. More or less, they're using all the components that get dropped off at the loading dock that day go into the outputs in the next day or a couple of days, right? So basically that way you don't have to waste money in components that are sitting there basically gathering dust. You don't have to pay for warehouse facilities. You don't have to pay for people. You don't get taxed on just things that are essentially collecting dust, right? Again, if the warehouse burns down, you just cancel all your contracts, right? Lots and lots and lots of great stuff about just-in-time inventory. Again, a lot of issues with just-in-time inventory. Again, we saw this with COVID. When COVID happened and a whole bunch of things got shut down, all of a sudden, again, Ford didn't have enough, processors for their cars just to, run the radios or whatever else, right? There's a lot of stuff with that also issues with just-in-time inventory. So I'm not a proponent of warehouses, nor am I a proponent for just-in-time inventory. They're just two different ways of doing things. Here's the thing. Again, if you say that America needs to be more self-reliant, and so ergo corporate manufacturers need to have larger warehouses, facilities, they need to store more equipment, more stuff needs to be built in the US. And then you give them 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, right? Even if I don't necessarily agree with the policy, at least that makes some kind of business sense. Because one of the things you have to think about is if you're going to build warehouses. So a lot of these companies got rid of their warehouses. They literally sold their warehouses off, right? So anyways, you need to find land for warehouses. You need to get permits to build houses or warehouses. You need to get the people to build the warehouse. Oh, hey, aren't warehouses usually sheathed in like aluminum sheathing or whatever that now has a 25% tariff on it? Anyways, you got to buy all the whatever to clad the warehouses in the whole 9 yards. And then past that, you need to train the warehouse staff and have the inventory systems and all that. Again, systems run everything. And then you need to buy all of that inventory. Again, think about a week, a month, 6 months of inventory. However, for these manufacturers, that is a ton of investment that they have to put in. And so, again, even if you disagree with it, you give them 2-3 years to get it done. Yeah, they're being told to do it tomorrow. Literally, we didn't know what the tariff policy was on April 1st. We didn't know. We were not told what the tariff policy was going to be on April 1st. April 2nd, these tariffs come out. Saturday, so April 2nd, so I'm doing this, so Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday's April 2nd. So Wednesday's April 2nd, we're told a huge number of these tariffs literally are coming online Saturday. 3 days, not 3 years, 3 days from when they were released. And the next tranche of tariffs get dumped on everybody on April 9th, which would be like 10 days or whatever from when the original tariff stuff was released. And so, like, like you could be 100% for this. You could be 100% for this, and still be so screwed. And still be so screwed right now. And I think that's the thing for my viewers and my students to be thinking about is we are in unknown territory right now. Again, even if you hate globalization, what you have to understand, my entire life has been about globalization. Again, I went to school for a while in West Virginia. So I was in elementary school and junior high school in West Virginia, right? And the thing was, globalization back then, it was killing a lot of the industry because they found it was cheaper. So in the steelmaking process, they need this crap called coke. Not coke you drink. It's a product of coal. And so basically, coal had been mined in West Virginia, got sent up to, like, I think it was Pittsburgh, got turned into coke. Then that coke was used in steel manufacturing process. Anyways, in the 80s, in the 80s. We're not talking about the 90s or the 80s. They found it was more economical to put the coal on train cars, ship it across country, put it on ships, ship it to Japan. We're talking about coal. We're not talking about gold or platinum, coal. They were shipping coal all the way to Japan for Japan to process it into coke, put it back on ships, put it back on rail cars, and shipped it to Pittsburgh. Because it cost less to do that in the 1980s than it was to take it from West Virginia and send it up like, I don't know, 100 miles up to Pittsburgh. Anyway, so we talk about globalization. Globalization's been with us all of my life. I'm almost 50 years old, and again, since I was a kid, since I was in elementary school, we've been told how globalization was changing everything, right? Coal jobs were dead when I was in elementary school. When ET came out, yeah, coal jobs were already dead. I'm just gonna put that out there. But anyways, right? So we've been doing this globalization. Again, NAFTA came out in the 90s. China, the World Trade Organization was like 2000 or whatever. We've been on this path. Again, you can argue about the path. You can hate the path. But we've been on this path almost all of my life, right? And so now with the Trump administration putting in these tariffs, a lot of the other things that they're doing, it is just going to be an astronomical amount of disruption. It is just companies, the way so many companies have operated for decades is now a question mark. And the issue, again, when you start dealing with businesses and you start dealing with supplier networks and all that kind of thing, is you then start to have, okay, each business is now a question mark. But every business relies on 10 other businesses. So if my business is a question mark and the vendors that I rely on, all of their businesses become question marks, it puts a massive amount of uncertainty out into the world. And again, one of the things you have to be thinking about, again, as a business owner, right, is that when business owners sign contracts, the least they sign a contract for is a year, right? If you rent a commercial space for a year, that's the shortest time you're going to be renting it, right? So if you rent right now in April of 2025, you own that damn thing till March of 2026. But here's the thing, right? When you start talking about warehouses, even if you're not building them, you're just leasing them, right? You're talking about 5 years. You're talking about 10 years. So you have to think about what is the investment outlay for 10 years? And again, with the current administration, 1 minute they're doing one thing, the next they're not. Right? Again, China or Canada, Mexico are going to get hammered with tariffs. And then they weren't going to get hammered with tariffs. And now they were going to get hammered with tariffs. And they weren't going to get hammered with tariffs. Now everybody's getting hammered with tariffs. Again, whether you like Trump or hate Trump, like this is what has happened over the past 7 weeks. Right? And so these companies have a tremendous amount of uncertainty. Right? And again, you think about companies hiring people. There's things called unemployment insurance. Right? So when you get hired by a company, they have to pay unemployment insurance. And that's basically to pay for your unemployment benefits. Now, here's the thing. Construction companies have really high unemployment insurance. Things like tech companies generally have low unemployment insurance. The issue is, it's not an industry thing. It's just how it happens to work out. Your unemployment insurance is decided essentially by how many times you lay off people. So whenever you lay off people, then they can go for unemployment, right? If they quit, they don't get unemployment. So again, with tech companies, most of the time your employees are going to quit. You're not going to lay them off. So unemployment insurance doesn't generally get hit, right? That's why construction companies, right? They boom and bust cycle. They work your ass off between spring to fall, and then they lay you off in the winter. Therefore, their unemployment insurance is high, right? So an unemployment insurance for a construction company might be 9 or 10%. Unemployment insurance for a technology company might be like 2 or 3%. Don't quote me on those, but somewhere along those lines, right? So if I have a business, and I'm worried about the future and financial stuff and all that kind of thing. And you think about how much it costs to onboard somebody, to onboard an employee. It generally takes 6 to 12 months. Again, a technical employee to get them up to speed. I think about how much money that's going to take. I think about having to pay a recruiter or whatever else. If I have to lay people off, is there going to be severance? Is that going to hit my unemployment insurance? Right? When I can sit down at a whiteboard and I can jot out a plan. And again, as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, I might be wrong. I might be wrong. But when I can sit there and I can say, this was our revenue last year based off of how many employees we have. This is our revenue this year based on how many employees we have. Ergo, I think next year, this is what our revenue is going to be. Therefore, we need a commensurate amount of employees. Right? If I can do that math, it's a lot easier to make the decision to hire people. Again, I might be wrong at the end of the day. COVID might happen, but that sounds about right, right? Again, you're sitting there. You're like, well, my revenue was this with this amount of people. My revenue was this and this amount of people. And Trump just put 10% tariffs on the entire world. let's just sit back. Let's sit back and see what happens. Right? That is a very, very reasonable decision by a business leader. The issue for you then, is where the hell does that get you? That's a question. Again, one thing to be thinking about, like when you look at old timers like me, it's very easy to pretend we knew what the hell we were doing. You do realize the only reason I became a consultant, I didn't become a consultant. I failed so much. I got laid off of a pizza delivery job. You want misery? I had U.S. Army, one of the longest electronics programs the U.S. Army had to offer. I had my bachelor's degree. I had my MCSE. I had 100 hours of Avaya systems training. I had Cisco training. I had all this stuff. I got laid off of pizza delivery. Not fired. Laid off of pizza delivery. I did not become a consultant. I met this guy, Adolfo. He talked about whatever. I put up some pull tab signs. Thankfully, enough people ripped my name off of pull tab signs. That is now history. Ergo, I look like a pretty smart person. Wow. Eli worked himself. He brought himself up by the bootstraps, created that consulting company. Like, yeah, sure. Put some pull tab signs because I had no money. I was a temporary file clerk making $10 an hour. College degree, MCSE, the rest of it, I was making $10 an hour as a temporary file clerk. That is reality. Yeah, I had a company, had 9 employees. Sky seems like it's a limit. Great recession happens. Again, our best customers stop fucking returning phone calls. I literally left a message with one of my best customers and said, look, if you're not going to pay this invoice, at least just let me know so I can tell the accountant to write it off. They still didn't bother to call me back. One thing leads to another. I started doing tech education videos, and for a while there, I was popular on YouTube. 1.1 million subscribers. Wow! Yeah. But that's how the economy goes. And so that's where, as the economy goes up and as the economy goes down, you've got to try to figure out where to position yourself. And especially if you're going to be an employee. The good thing about being an entrepreneur is I get to tell my own story. This, right, as an entrepreneur, is very much like being a YouTube content creator. It's a monologue. I can walk into a CEO and I can tell my story. Just don't let the wife be around. Don't let the wife anywhere near that meeting. She'll goes bad. Anyways, right, I can monologue. The issue is if you're going to be an employee, you don't really get the monologue, right? They're going to be looking at that resume. And so when they're looking at that resume is the book, right? That's the thing, is like an entrepreneur is standing on the stage presenting their argument. I am. I can do for you. You can rise up. Right, that's what I can do as an entrepreneur. Right? I can sell you a shit ton of sizzle. I can sell you a shit ton of sizzle with a tiny bit of steak behind it. Right? But here's the thing, right? As an employee, they're more reading your book. They're reading your resume. They're reading the CV. And when they're reading that resume, when they're reading that CV, that story has to make sense to them. They have to believe that your character is going to work well with it in their ensemble of a server room cast. What's the answer? I have no idea. I am but a drama geek standing in the server room trying to pass on some of the lessons that I have learned. So, anyways, again, I would think with a lot of you folks out there, some of you might think about, again, the college degree, keeping on with the college degree, and getting the highest value college degree you can. Please, for the love of God, do not get basket weaving degrees. Don't get ITIS degrees. Again, get real degrees. Get degrees that are hard. Get degrees that make you want to fucking cry. Again, it's kind of like with those day in the life things, those day in the life videos, right? Again, think about with college kids, right? Don't get the degree where you can get drunk on Tuesday and it doesn't matter. Don't get the degree where you can skip half the classes and it doesn't matter. Get the degree where you show up to every class, you do every bit of homework, and then you go back to your dorm, you drop to your fucking knees, and you have a bit of a mental breakdown because it's so damn difficult. Because those people will be valuable at the end of the day. A basket weaver is not so much. That's what I got. That's what I got. I gotta go finish my class on Comfy UI. Very cool. Doing a class on Comfy UI tomorrow. And yeah, see y'all later.